the suffering that men have exclusively faced in wartime and in war cannot be understated. I would argue that if we're looking at amount of suffering or amount of grievance, I don't think you can look at anything and tell me there's a singular female, or even in totality of, you put together all of women's grievances, and they fall flat in the face of war and forced conscription.
Wouldn't that be, though, you guys are fighting other guys, or fighting because, I don't know, some dictator is doing some crazy stuff overseas? So, I mean, you're fighting other men, right?
And women didn't tell you to do, like, that system was set up by men. We didn't set up
stop fighting.
Right.
So
do
a couple
away
things.
with it if you don't like it.
So just to be clear,
Stop killing each
throughout
other.
history, there have been queens.
Yeah.
Currently, there are heads of state that are female that are involved in, to some degree, military conflicts.
Yeah.
Let me revise that a little bit. There are countries with female heads of state that are involved by proxy with certain wars and evens. Anyways, but queens, for example, they actually did a study. They looked at kings versus queens, and they actually found that queens were more likely to go to war than kings.
Was that because people were going after them because they were female, or was that studied at all? I'm just curious,
I don't know the specifics.
You know what I mean?
I don't know the specifics of it, but my understanding of the study is that these monarchs, these queens, they were more likely to go to I don't know if it was start a war. I'll have to further look into that, but I believe they were more likely to start a war than kings.
Yeah, I'm curious on it, because I'm wondering if it is that they're like, oh, there's a female head, let's go after her, we can grab her land, and then she's having to defend. But no, there was what's the name of that one queen in Bloody Mary? Yeah, she had a lot.
But you made a point of like, but it's men who are sending the men to war.
Yeah.
So, like, why would that matter? Like, men are not this hive mind collective. Like,
and neither are women, though.
Yeah, I'm not saying that though.
But you're saying like our collective grievances don't amount to the war thing, and I mean maybe so, but I guess how does that?
Well, so when I'm talking about collective grievances, the difference here is, so you're talking about something else. You're saying, well, you're asking whose fault is that? Whose fault is that? That doesn't really relate to my statement as it relates to grievance comparison. So
you're saying y'all should be able to cry more than us because you have to go to war? Is that what it is?
I'm not saying men have to cry more. I'm saying if, for example, we're looking at things through the lens of oppression or hurt or damage or suffering or privilege or lack thereof, then this specific thing, I think, is worse and has caused more suffering in the specific gender, men in this case, than all of women's collective grievances. So you add all the up, we couldn't vote for a period of time, and we couldn't, women couldn't vote. The claims about SA, the claims about gender gap, the claims of whatever it is, add them all together, not as bad as all the men who have died or been forced to go to war.
I think it's all of it.
Can I add on to that, though, that,
Sure.
Okay, obviously dying is the worst situation, especially in war. However, think about the women who collectively lost their husbands to war. They're grieving. Obviously, dying is the worst situation, but grieving that death, having to raise the children, and then having all of that collective stuff that you kind of just downplayed a bit. There's a lot of layers to a woman's grieving. No, I'm saying that obviously dying
the
is
war thing, but okay.
But who's left to take care of when the men die? It's like the women who they've left behind, and obviously like dying, like I've said, is the worst situation in war. However, life does continue to go on after death, and who's there to have to
Oh, I see what you're saying. Go ahead.
to deal with the ramifications? It's the women who you already admitted have been through these traumatic situations, and I'm not downplaying men's part in war is
sure.
obviously completely traumatic. We see that. It's just different types of trauma. Like women have to carry with them the trauma of having a husband who's
Okay.
died in war as well.
Yeah. So is your position that, I mean, you didn't indicate it here. Do you think women are the primary victims of war?
No, because dying
But-
is obviously.
Okay, so you're saying men are the primary victims of war, and I don't disagree with you.
Oh,
that,
I also wanted to just kind of recap in saying that I don't think that it should really be taken as a issue of the sexes or genders. I think it should be taken that we collectively as men and women are actually basically fighting against like the 1%, the people who are in power, who are causing wars to actually happen. Like we were saying, kings and queens. We're turning it into a gender argument. But like we just said, both sexes, genders, whatever we want to call it, suffer immensely from war. So
men
to be
suffer
like,
more.
Sure.
okay.
But they're still
Are you
suffering.
disputing that?
I mean, death is the ultimate suffering, so I'm not going to say that that's not true. However, women have to carry on life after death, and that is a terrible process of grieving. And then
I mean,
having to take care of children that are still alive who actively don't have a parent in the home anymore. So it's
Yeah.
terrible all around.
Yeah. It's all
So yes, so I'll engage there. So I think the where I would begin with this is that you would also have to acknowledge that men have male relatives too. So that would be further, not just female suffering when men die, but also male suffering when men die, whether it's fathers, brothers, friends, or sons.
And I agree
So
that
there's-
those men usually have to step in and kind of take care of the children of
Sure.
in the community.
My next point would be, though, is that while I'll agree with you that men aren't the exclusive sufferers when it comes to war, yeah, women also suffer, children suffer, boys and girls suffer when it comes to war. War, everybody suffers, right? But I think it's going to be a hard sell to tell me that when we're looking at something that's gender specific, in this case, every single country in the world, I think except for maybe there might be some small one I'm not aware of, or Israel, where forced military conscription is exclusively male. In all the other countries, absent maybe one or two. In any case, it doesn't matter because of all the major countries, only men are subject to forced military conscription. Do you have something? Or?
Yeah, actually, recently there's a bill imposed. Certain states, you do have to sign up for, women do have to sign up for drafts. There's
Erroneous.
That's
Erroneous.
it's not true.
it's opt-in or it's
Women can volunteer to join the military, but there's no. First off, it wouldn't be at the state level that this would be done. The selective service system is a federal system, so it would be done at the federal level. So there's this idea that on this individual state level, some of the women can be drafted. It's just not true. And there's no bill. I can't. Maybe there's some dumb bill that's been introduced in a state legislature. I can't imagine it's enforceable. I don't even believe that that's true. But it would be at the federal level.
oh no.
See, I think it's more of a class
we could
war situation than it is the
I say
actual
look
like
it up.
gender war that we want to make it into because like we just said, men are suffering immensely from going to war. Women are suffering immensely from not having their husbands around in the home to care for the children. Everyone's suffering, and I think it's collectively because like usually the people suffering the most are the lower class because those are the ones who are getting drafted or deciding to go into the army.
Okay, so I want to finish making my point here.
Okay.
So I'm trying to recall exactly what. Oh, okay. You were saying, well, the wives and the mothers and the daughters, they all suffer, right? When men die in war. What would you think if I made the following argument? That in rebuttal to the pain that women experience when they're essayed, I said, well, their brothers and their fathers and their boyfriends and their husbands suffer when women, and I'm using that to redirect and misdirect from your claim about the suffering it causes women when they're essayed, and I say, yeah, but let's think about the men in their lives. You would find that objectionable, I'm sure.
Well, they're the ones doing the essaying usually.
The brothers and the boyfriends
No,
and
but
the fathers
men in
and-
general. So it does hurt the people
What?
in the women's lives, the men in the women's lives who are getting essayed. It does hurt them because it hurts their reputation, and also like they could say something to other men to try to help prevent these things.
I don't feel like you're actually contending with my argument, so I'll give you a different example. When women go through pregnancy, it's really hard for the husbands. And
husbands have a part in making a child, so it should be hard for the husbands as well. But it's harder.
Well, I don't think it should be, but